Essentially, Nexus is the newest member of the Dimension product family, starting with our flagship system, the Dimension Icon, our high-speed AFM Dimension Fast Scan, as well as the Dimension Pro system, which allows coverage of up to 200, 300 millimeter wafers, more of our industrial side AFM, as well as the Icon IR, which is our AFM IR system, which allows simultaneous AFM and chemical identification characterization of samples. And one of the things that all of these systems do have in common, including Nexus, is that they operate on our latest Nanoscope 6 controller and operate in the Nanoscope software environment. And because all these systems operate on the Nanoscope, that means that they all have peak force tapping, including Nexus now. And I'm sure everybody's at this point familiar with peak force tapping, but just briefly, essentially it is a mode where we oscillate the cantilever at sub-resonant frequencies using very low amplitudes. It uses a continuous feedback loop that's based on the peak force between the tip and the sample, so that the feedback loop continuously monitors and adjusts to maintain that peak force. There's many benefits to this mode, including the fact that because we're monitoring that peak force and we have very highly sensitive force control, we're able to use very low imaging forces. This allows you to image very sensitive samples, as well as maintain the integrity of both the tip and the sample over extended periods of imaging. This results in very consistent and highly repeatable, very high resolution images. Images are required at typical scan rates, so it's not slow imaging. We can image at normal rates. And then one of the other benefits is that with peak force tapping, because it's essentially performing force curves, we can use the information from these force curves to get simultaneous information and quantitative information on the nanoscale properties of the sample. For example, we have peak force QM, which looks at the nanomechanical properties, and peak force TUNA, which also allows electrical characterization. In fact, peak force tapping, we introduced this to the market in 2010, and in the past 15 years, we've seen a really fast and very successful adoption, probably the most successful adoption rate of any mode in AFM, where in fact, to date, we have almost 10,000 publications on peak force tapping in peer-reviewed articles, which basically works out to be almost 2 papers per day for the past 15 years. So that's been really great to see. But not only peak force tapping, Nexus also has a full range of advanced AFM modes to address all major application areas in materials research. That's from 2D materials, polymers, functional materials, biomaterials, all kinds of materials applications. And many of those modes that Nexus has are unique to Bruker, including the full suite of peak force tapping modes. So that's the peak force tapping topography and all the derivative modes, like I talked about QM and peak force TUNA. It also has Scan Assist, which is our self-optimizing imaging mode. Data cubes mode that gives you hyperspectral data sets, torsional resonance, and then torsional resonance dynamic friction microscopy. Many of these modes are very unique to Bruker AFMs through the Nanoscope's controller, and are also available on Nexus. Nexus does also have accessories that enable imaging in liquid, and also provides environmental controls so that you can characterize samples under varying environmental conditions. For example, the heater cooler, so you can look at temperature variations. So there's a very nice set of modes and a complete set of accessories and options. So another thing that Nexus does have in common with the rest of the Dimension family is that it's a large sample AFM. And you can see here in this photo of Nexus, and you'll see in the live demo that Beat has at the end, it has a very large sample stage. You can sample compatibility, our wafers up to 6-inch, that's the maximum. And then as well as standard small samples, which we put on those 15 millimeter magnetic pucks. Those can be positioned on the actual stage chuck here, and you can do single or individual samples. You can put multiple samples on the stage. the tip scanning, it is a tip scanning system. So this design and then this nice open access that you see on the stage really allows for a range of custom samples and customized experimental setups. For example, you can integrate the types of external probers, where in this case, the probers are being used to apply electrical connections to the sample, and then the AFM is then used to observe the electrical signals from the samples. And then, you know, Nexus does have an integrated acoustic enclosure, which you see on the system here. It actually looks like part of the system itself with this hinged door and a nice window on the front. And what this does with this integrated enclosure is it really makes a nice compact footprint. So the microscope itself can sit on a small air table or on top of a bench on top of an active anti-vibration isolation table. So what this really does is it's a nice compact small footprint. So it's a really high performance tabletop AFM, but having large sample capabilities at the same time. Nexus also enhances productivity. It has several ease of use features that benefit both new users and AFM experts. It has an alignment station to assist with tip laser alignment and photodetector alignment. In the Nanoscope software, which you can see it just a little screenshot here. It's an intuitive user interface, and it has a guided workflow that essentially guides users from selecting the correct mode to setting up the parameters within a specific workspace. We also have hundreds of probes. The software will recommend which probe you should use for a particular workspace. And then, in fact, we have inside the software a huge probes database. So once you select a probe, all the parameters related to a specific probe are then loaded into the software. So it'll pre-populate all of these scanning parameters so that you can start getting quantitative data immediately without having to necessarily go through the full probe calibration. And again, Nexus does have the scan assist, which really makes getting high quality images very easy, regardless of whether or not you're a new user or an expert user. So scan assist is on there as well. Nexus does have a motorized XY stage, which you can see in the video down here. It is programmable, so that's very useful in setting up multi-site on a sample or multi-sample measurements. And even in the Nanoscope software, there's a little feature called Program Move, which you can set up very simple recipes to pre-program these multi-site or multi-sample measurements. And then, of course, we have more advanced scripting capabilities like Nanoscope that automates, again, multi-sample or multi-site measurements and with the automation of the XYZ movement of the stage. And Bede will actually show you a short demo of that at the end of the presentation today.